Madam President.
The Minority Leader.
Yesterday evening, the Senate and House Armed Services Committee released a strong, bipartisan National Defense Authorization Act. As Republicans have said for months, and I repeated yesterday, our service members, commanders, and civilian leaders should not have had to wait until mid-December to gain certainty for a fiscal year that's already more than 2 months over. We've got to take our national defense, military modernization, and defense industrial base as seriously as our rivals take theirs. Fortunately, this strong bipartisan NDAA is a huge step in that direction. The bill tees up a significant and badly needed increase in defense spending, $45 billion above President Biden's insufficient request, and roughly $75 billion over last year's level. Once again, Congress agreed on a bipartisan basis that President Biden's defense budget request was anemic and insufficient. This NDAA authorizes crucial projects like nuclear modernization. It directs critical investments in our defense industrial base so America can both defend ourselves and remain the arsenal of democracy for the world. It delivers for our service members, their families, and our military installations and communities around the country. Thanks to leadership from our colleague Senator Blackburn, among others, this NDAA will repeal the President's military vaccine mandate, a policy which this Democratic administration had stubbornly clung to, even as it had clearly undermined readiness and hurt retention. And just as Republicans insisted, just as our service members deserve, this NDAA is not getting dragged down by unrelated liberal nonsense. Good, smart policies were kept in, and unrelated nonsense, like easier financing for illegal drugs, was kept out. I'm glad this Democrat-led Congress finally realized that defending America is a basic governing duty. It's not some Republican priority that Democrats can demand unrelated goodies to be wheedled into. Neither party, let alone a sitting president's party, can ever have the mindset that they need to be goaded or bartered into supporting our troops. We made it clear we wouldn't be going down that road. Our Democratic colleagues finally accepted it, and Senators Reid and Inhofe did a great job landing the plane. Now, that same lesson must carry over into our subsequent conversations about government funding. Democrats must be ready to actually fund the national defense, which this bipartisan NDAA authorizes. Just like on this bill, neither party has any standing to demand unrelated goodies in exchange for doing our job and funding defense. And let's hope this new acceptance of reality also helps shape President Biden's next defense budget request. We have yet to see a proposed budget for this administration that takes growing threats very seriously. Why do bipartisan majorities in Congress keep having to force this commander-in-chief to adequately resource our armed forces? Today is December 7th, the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. No American wants us to ever receive another painful reminder like December the 7th or September the 11th of the painful price we pay when we let our guard down, soften our defenses, or diminish our worldwide presence. This strong NDAA is one important step in keeping our guard up, but only one. We need to put it on the President's desk quickly and then stay equally serious on this subject. Now, on a related matter, the annual defense bill I just discussed will carry the name of one of our most senior and distinguished colleagues this year, the outstanding Armed Services Committee ranking member to whose career it will provide the perfect capstone. Senator Jim Inhofe, often soft-spoken manner and unfailing humility are a pair of traits that have combined to produce one of the most effective legislators I've ever had the privilege of working with. At the same time, over the same one career, Jim's name has come to mean both steady solid conservative constancy here at home, and relentless energy as a globetrotter deal maker. The mixture has left his home state, our entire nation, and faraway lands all changed for the better. The roots of Jim's conservative bona fides aren't hard to trace. In fact, the story of his entry into politics is a familiar one for millions of Americans. There was honorable military service. There was hard work and success as a small businessman in his hometown of Tulsa. And then there were the inevitable headaches of having your can-do entrepreneurial dreams bogged down in bureaucracy and regulation. Jim knew it shouldn't be that way, so he threw his own hat into the ring. Jim's passion for harnessing American energy was obvious pretty early on as well. Apparently, even while he was a student at the University of Colorado, Jim got together with some classmates and filed a claim on uranium deposits discovered nearby. This is a man who seems to have been born with a built-in turbo prop. Our friend has an insatiable drive to discover and get things done. Short stints and bouncing around were how a busy young Jim Inhofe worked his way to a college degree by way of 9 different schools. It also how this seasoned aviator circumnavigated the globe. Jim's conservative convictions and his boundless problem-solving energy might have seemed to be on a collision course, but instead they've proven the perfect harmony. From the state capitol, where Jim earned the trust of his Oklahoma Senate colleagues and served in the thankless role of minority leader, to a gubernatorial campaign during which he reportedly lost 57 pounds, to the 1994 Senate race where our friend clawed his way back from 32 points down in the polls to win back a seat Republicans had held only 6 of the last 45 years, to the 5 more landslide re-elections that followed. You'd be forgiven if you assumed that such a successful elected official might have made some major compromises along the way. But you don't become famous for flying planes upside down without a strong internal compass that stays fixed on true north. Our friend knows that faith can move mountains, and James Mountain Inhofe has himself been moved to incredible achievements by his love of God, love of country, and love of neighbor. Don't get me wrong, Jim knows how to twist the screws to get things done, like landing generational investments in transportation infrastructure across Oklahoma and the heartland, or protecting American energy dominance by pioneering and then protecting the new technologies and methods that have ushered in a whole new era of prosperity and independence for our country, or strengthening and modernizing our armed forces by leading the must-pass NDAA across the finish line. Jim's done it all, but in a city where a lot of people treat friendships and relationships as means to desired ends, Jim has always viewed genuine relationships as noble ends in themselves. Just take it from our Democratic colleague from Rhode Island. Senator Whitehouse once had to admit that Jim was simultaneously his worst foe and his key ally. Or consider the many years Jim has devoted to deep partnerships with leaders in Africa. By all accounts, Jim's engagement began not with lobbying a particular issue or advancing a particular administration's priorities. Our friend has never been anyone's tool or puppet. Jim formed deep, genuine personal bonds with fellow legislators and leaders in Africa just because he felt drawn to do so. But as always happens with Jim, where relationships started, big results followed. Jim's trusted status as a senior statesman and stable counselor had secretaries of state, secretaries of defense, and ambassadors seeking his sage advice. Just a few years ago, as I understand it, Jim was called upon to help ease an extremely tense and acrimonious political standoff between rival leaders in Kenya. Of course, he had known both men for years. And when the opportunity arose during the country's national prayer breakfast, Jim took a moment of personal privilege after praying an invocation and got the two men to literally hug each other in front of the cameras and their countrymen. It made international news. So you get the picture. Relationships matter. But with Jim, two relationships matter most of all. The one with his God and the one with his beloved Kay. Jim and Kay have been married for 63 years. And anyone who's spent any time around Jim knows what happens when his beloved bride calls him up. It doesn't matter if you're the president of Kenya or the president of the United States. Your conversation is politely put on hold. The woman Jim calls his rock always comes first. Over the last half-century, Jim Inhofe's devotion to his country, his fellow Oklahomans, and his conservative principles have produced a mountain of a legacy. But I know his most cherished peak is his and Kay's mutual love and devotion, and the legacy that relationship has produced, namely Perry, Katie, Molly, and Jim, who have in turn grown the Inhofe clan by, I believe, 16 grandchildren. Our dear friend has given generously to his country. He's more than earned some extra time with those he loves most. So Jim, thank you for your exemplary service.